Hello and welcome to episode 74 of the Foundry Roundtable, the podcast exclusively covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I'm your tame Foundry author, Drogan1701, and with me are my partners in interstellar crime, Greendragoon and Markhawkman.
You know, we've never been convicted.
Yeah, but I know better.
Allegedly.
Now, tonight we're going to be changing things up a bit. We're actually going to do the entire inside the Foundry. And there's a bit of Foundry news that actually makes this possible, and that is that the invisible object bug has been fixed. So we can actually go back in and do lots of custom work now. So thank you very much for Cryptic for getting that one fixed.
Yay!
So, using Greendragoon as our Foundry author here, what we're going to be doing is demonstrating how to build custom maps. There's a lot of different ways you can do custom maps, but what we're going to demonstrate here is what we call a sky castle. That's a term that we use on the show frequently. So it's basically the practice of building an entire map from scratch using the floor and wall objects built either high above a ground map or in the black space of an interior map.
So I'm mostly going to be following your lead on this one.
Okay. So, I've come up with kind of a step-by-step process of how to be doing this. I'd say, you know, with how the Foundry is built, this can be a bit of a headache, but I don't think it necessarily has to always be, because there's some planning that you can do that helps it, and there's some easy tips and tricks that we will show you tonight. So, if you are set up,
I'm ready to go.
All right. So we're also going to be asking for some help from our friends in the chat room, deciding a few of the directions that we're going to take here. So, for step one, I mean, the very first thing you want to do is you want to figure out what's the purpose of the map. What are you going to use it for in the story? We're kind of going to skip that step a little bit because we don't actually have a story that we're working on. So we're just going to build the map itself. So the very first thing that you want to do is you want to decide what the map is going to be. It's going to be a space station. It's going to be a starship. It's going to be, you can even do ground exteriors on these kinds of sky castles. I think for our purposes here, the choice is going to be between a space station or a starship. So that's the first question that I'm going to ask for the chat room. Should we build a space station interior or a starship interior? And of course, every time we ask one of these questions, we're actually going to have to wait a little bit for the stream to catch up.
Well, in the meantime, why don't you guys talk about what you've been working on lately?
Well, I actually have been doing some writing on that mission that's going to take place on the holodeck far in the past on the Romulan attack on Starbase 1. I'm still about maybe like 2/3 of the way through the script.
That's one of those projects that we haven't heard about in a while.
Yes.
There's a few of those.
It's definitely still one that I very much want to do and want to get completed. It looks like we're here in Starship. Okay, we'll make a Starship. The next question for the chat room is what species? As far as the assets go, we kind of have access to Klingon, Cardassian, Federation, and Romulan, or generic.
We got a couple options for generic.
Mm-hmm.
I like the science and then the that freighterish interior.
I'm not entirely a fan of the science walls, though. I don't think they look all that good.
Maybe with the right dressing, they can be made to work.
My tinkering with the science walls leaves me annoyed because they're so small. You can't build a large interior with them without putting like 200 of them on the map.
All right, so we're here in Romulan. Sounds good for me. We've got 2 votes for Romulan, 1 vote for Fed. Say we don't want to have too much dead air here, so I think let's go with Romulan.
Okay.
So let's see. So we are doing a Romulan ship interior. So the next thing we want to think about is how big do we want the map to be? You guys, give input on this as well. My co-host here.
Well, I would say we shouldn't make it too big. We got to build this in one episode.
Too overboard. Yeah. Well, let's see. What do you need on a Romulan ship interior? You want, you want the bridge.
Okay, that should be good because we don't exactly have any Romulan bridges in the Foundry.
Yeah. So you want a bridge. You want, a hallway leading out of the bridge. And let's see. What else do you need? In that. Obviously, we're going to do this all on one deck,
Captain's
essentially.
quarters, or the captain's ready room.
Yeah, captain's ready room can work. So a bridge ready room. Let's do like a mess hall.
Okay. Any thoughts on whether we should build this outside or in the black space?
That's definitely one of the things that's actually slightly skipping ahead.
Sorry, it's the next step I have to worry about.
It's the next step that you'll worry about as our builder. Let's keep it to those three rooms, say.
Okay.
A mess hall, a ready room, and a bridge. We'll say maybe this is one of the little scout ships, so that'll all be on one deck. So as far as the feel of the map goes, the question is here, do you want it to feel sort of cramped, everything close together? Do you want it to feel very expansive? Do you want it to feel in the middle? My thought on this one, personally, is that in this case, since it's a Romulan scout ship, it should kind of feel a little cramped. Everything should feel a bit narrow, but not so narrow that gameplay is hindered. So keep that in mind when you're placing our walls. Okay, so yeah, step 3 is the base map. So the question is, the first question I would ask is, do you want to incorporate any existing geometry into the map? I think in our case it would be no.
Yeah, if we're doing this custom, it would be kind of cheating to use a map. Although, for authors, I definitely recommend if you find that you can use a base map and just tweak it, or like redress it, that is often a really good solution. Mm-hmm. But I think
especially because there are certain things that we cannot place on a map as part of making a custom map.
Now here's the next question that determines what base map you're going to want to use. Do you want to use buildings? I think in this case for us it's another no. You can use buildings as walls, and they give you some interesting options there, but I think in this case for us, the answer is no.
Something else to consider is, do we want to be able to see the stars? Or are we going to have windows?
Well, that might be a little tougher in a Romulan-themed map, because it'd be a little tough to make some windows there.
I don't know, would it?
But, on both interior and exterior, there are backdrops where there's good star fields that you can see out. So you can kind of go both ways.
But the one downside with the ground space background, or star background, is that it has the horizon on it.
Yeah, it does tend to do that.
Well, a horizon could work if you're like...
if you want to be in orbit or something.
Yeah. If it's like the horizon of a planet.
So why don't we go with ground?
Okay.
I think it provides a lot of options. It's one thing. I kind of use both back and forth, and there's really... I wouldn't say there's one that's better than the other. So, I don't know. My favorite one to build on is the meadow clearing. It's got that nice sort of featureless area in the middle. You can do it really on anything, but that's my thought.
Yeah, we build high enough that it almost doesn't matter.
Yeah. And it does have a nice high ceiling. These maps do have actual ceilings. but they're pretty high up. Say my favorite interior map to build on is the Rapier interior, because it's like a Defiant bridge and then a little bit more section of the ship with a huge black space in between that you can build in.
I think I've been building in one of the cave interiors that has a massive amount of excess black space, just because it's also really, really deep.
All right, so we've got our base map.
I do.
On to step 4, which is the floor and the ceiling. So we want to decide what floor we're going to place.
Well,
obviously, Taco Fangs is in our chat room. We can thank him right now, as we have many times before, for all the awesome floors.
I haven't really taken a close look at all the Romulan options.
Well, let's see the Romulan options. We've got 3 different kinds of carpets here.
Got brown, dark green, and gray.
Tumor Boy says Garrett Wong is recording audio as he's typing this, which is totally awesome. Captain Kim for the win.
Man, I'm impressed. I mean, he's got Garrett Wong in the studio, and he comes and visits with us. That's dedication to the fans.
Well, Garrett's probably in the sound booth right now, so he can't do anything with him in it.
I'm kind of curious in trying to make this decision. I'm actually kind of curious what the walls look like, because I kind of would influence my decision on the ceiling and floor.
Let's go take a look at the walls.
There we are. All right, so
the question is,
here.
there are several kinds of Romulan walls.
I imagine we want Romulan wall ship.
Yeah, that would be what I would say.
Which is still the older style, but I do like it.
It's kind of silver and with green highlights.
All right, so
now I'd say one thing here is, even though there's 3 floors that are labeled as Romulan, if you're building a Romulan map, you don't necessarily have to confine yourself to those floors.
That's certainly true.
Because there might be a better one that looks good with this particular wall.
Let's take a look at some of the other ones. Most of the
I'm thinking specifically that sort of there's a Federation floor that's like reflective metal. I'm almost thinking that one might look good.
Yeah, I could see that working. All right, do you just want to go with like a big, giant one, and then we can...
yeah, the biggest one you got.
All right, let's kick that up to...
I actually discovered a funny thing when I was going back and replacing my floors and ceilings in some of the old maps, is that the old building blocks, which we used to use as floors before these came along, are sized in meters, and this one is sized in feet. So they're not the same size when you're replacing.
Yeah.
So you have to tweak that a little bit.
But that wouldn't be the first foot to meter inconsistency in the Foundry.
Absolutely. So,
well, I mean, lots of the objects are like that, actually.
Yeah, I think all of the measurements drawn up in the descriptions are still in feet.
Absolutely. So at this point, don't forget to set the Y relative to when you've got your object selected here, and set it to 0 altitude.
How far above do you typically like to build?
I usually just start with 500.
And probably should turn off snap to grid.
Yeah, it just needs to be high enough that none of the baked-in geometry will touch your map.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of figured. Believe it or not, this is actually the first custom interior I've built on a ground map.
typically
I've
use
never actually
interiors.
done one on the ground map.
Now, the next thing you want to do right here is, once you've got that done, is take your spawn point and put it at 501 meters up and move it over to where it's sitting on the floor.
Actually, a funny thing. What do you guys think about a ceiling?
Well, that's the next step.
So,
so here's what you want to do when you're building a ceiling, I think. Is now we know what wall we're going to use, so go ahead and put one of those on there near the spawn point. This is just a test wall. I'm kind of following on in the Foundry of my own as well.
okay.
Now, this is also kind of a test of how high we think we want to put this Romulan wall. Let's just start it off at 500 and see if we need to tweak it later.
Oh, you want to do a couple of test runs to get the height then?
Yeah, this is all about figuring out what the height of the walls and the ceiling is going to need to be.
Actually, it just occurred to me I forgot to switch the Y value on my wall. There's
a lot of things you can forget.
Good thing the project's tiny right now.
That's why we test.
Try that again.
It looks like it could come up a little bit.
Yeah. I can't really see under it, but maybe about 2 meters. 2 meters might be too much, but should get us in the ballpark.
The Foundry is a lot of trial and error.
Yeah.
And error and error and error.
And eyeballing distances in meters.
And a lot of these objects, they're sort of their center points. You know, the 0 point is going to be different. There's going to be stuff that some objects stick below that, some objects stick above that a lot.
Yeah.
So you put something at 500, and you put another object at 500. They're not going to be exactly equal.
Yeah. I mean, so some objects will actually have the 0 point in the object in the center of the object. Some of them don't. Some of them it's off in the corner. There's some that's actually outside the object entirely.
I think, well,
one of the Klingon-themed doors is like that. It's like they do this big
that's really close.
square, and the 0 point is one of the corners of the square. And it's not even in the object itself.
I think it's going to be right about 1.55 meters.
We're zeroing in on it. And this will help us later because we're going to have to place a lot of these walls, so knowing what the height is.
Well, yeah, it's definitely a lot less work to do it now, and then we can just copy and paste the wall.
Yep.
I think that's about nailed it.
So what's the height there on that one?
It's 1.55 meters above the platform.
Fantastic. All right, now the next step is determining what height our ceiling is going to need to be. And we got to figure out what our ceiling is going to look like.
Well, let me throw an idea out here. What if we were to use the metal for the ceiling and then like one of the carpets for the floor?
Yeah, we could do that.
Sounds good.
So what you need to do here is then change the floor object we already have to the carpet.
I thinking the dark gray will work nicely.
Dark gray.
I think the green might just be a little bit too much. Although, look at some of the other colors we got in the other factions. And Klingons are all metal. Yeah, I'm thinking the dark gray Romulan will be our best bet. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this.
All right.
Actually, the downside to this is that our wall section is now covered up by the ceiling, which is something we really don't want.
We don't really care about that wall. It's just a test wall. As long as we remember that it's 501.55. Because we can get rid of it and put more walls down later.
I'm going to do a little trick. Duplicate the wall, delete the original, duplicate the ceiling, and delete the original, and they've swapped places.
There you go. But make sure you got that wall in there so that we can tell that we've got our ceiling at the right height.
Yeah.
Okay, so...
See,
Yep. No,
you want to have the floor and ceiling offset a little bit so that they're easy to select if you need to move them again.
Nope.
I usually just select the floor and ceiling by the name in the list on the left.
You can do that as well.
That's probably not a bad idea.
I always find that I usually end up placing objects on top of the select button for the floor anyway.
It does happen. So now we have to decide what height our ceiling is going to need to be, and the best way to start is just pick one, say 5'10" or something, and test it and see if that's a good height. Pax Federatica says that he's been using the green carpet for his floor and one of the Klingon metal floors for his ceiling.
Yeah, metal ceilings work pretty well because, well, especially inside ships, because that's usually what you think of when you think of ship bulkheads and stuff like that. Although the Federation seems to like this weird alloy that looks like it's painted white all the time.
Well, the funny thing, the Romulan walls have this really large overhang. At least one of them does, which is really nice for kind of breaking up the
ceiling.
The ceiling.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like the wall comes with its own piece of ceiling.
Just a little bit, yeah.
I was using those generic walls.
They do that as well.
Big overlap, and I've actually was forming my ceilings by having the two overhangs join.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so
now this is one of those times when it would have been really nice to have that free cam command back. So Taco, if you're still listening, you press on somebody to try and fix that. So we used to have a keyboard, or a console command where you could put in /freecam or /UGC_freecam, something like that, and you could get, your camera could go anywhere. But
Yeah, our best guess
unfortunately,
is
one of the previous patches got rid of that.
your best guess is somebody changed the command and didn't
We haven't
realize.
been able to figure out what it is.
All right, I think I've got that pretty much on. I'm at a 511.8.
511.8, huh? All right. So we've got our floor and our ceiling. Now, essentially, what we want to do is... Taco says, who shot who in the what now?
It's Colonel Mustard in the parlor with the butter knife.
Or it was 7 of 9 in the Astrometrics with the TR-116 that's not a TR-116.
How about an infinity modulator?
All right, so next step is we want to do our basic layout. So we need our 3 rooms and hallways connecting the rooms. Personally, how I like to do this is I actually like to turn Snap to Grid on until I've got the basic layout done. Then I kind of go back
That's true.
and get everything to its proper height and that sort of thing. So, Dragoon, we're going to leave it up to you to build our layout here. What you want to make sure you do is overlap these walls so that there's no gaps in between them. Multi-select is a very nice thing to have. Can't believe we ever built maps without it.
Well, it does have a few, I guess you could say, risk associated with it, but, you know, those are relatively minimal.
Now, what we're showing you here is kind of quick and dirty. We're going to make sure that Dragoon, we were making fun of him a little bit for this before the podcast. We're going to make sure he's not too much of a perfectionist.
Yeah, I can go overboard.
And you can see one of the difficulties with Snap to Grid right there is that it doesn't always let you put things exactly where you want. But I think it's useful in getting the overall basic wall layout how you want it. And then you can kind of go back and get it a little bit more precise.
Yeah, it's a broad stroke sort of thing, then you fine-tune it later.
Yeah.
So tell us what you're putting together here so
Well,
far.
I honestly, off the top of my head, don't actually remember how a Romulan bridge is shaped, so I'm kind of just coming up with a...
Well, not all Romulan bridges have to look alike.
Sure. But I figured it would have a...
I see you got a little alcove there off to the side.
Yeah, for like stations and whatnot. I remember... I watched Face of the Enemy not too long ago. And I seem to remember having lots of spaces off to the side.
Yeah.
So, something we can stick some consoles in.
Mm-hmm.
The tricky part is just making sure I'm symmetrical, remembering to make it symmetrical.
Well, when you get both sides put on, both alcoves, you'll kind of... And when you meet in the middle, you kind of figure it out.
I think I'm pretty close.
Yeah, pretty close.
Uh,
See, even what Mark and I are seeing on the stream is delayed, of course, from what you're actually doing.
Yeah. Well, I've thought about trying to send you the feed over Skype, but be sending out 2 streams at once. Probably not the best idea.
Yeah, that would be a bit.
Okay, that seems pretty good enough.
Okay. Do a test and let's run in and look at it.
And let me move over my spawn point.
Now remember, one little useful thing is that if you click an object and right-click on it there's a command that says play map from here.
Yeah,
Very
it can be.
useful thing.
It can be a little tricky though. I don't think it respects the Y value. Of course, my wall
I'm testing it here, so I'll find out here. I'll do a little investigation.
Of course, my Y values are thrown off slightly because I was using Snap to Grid, but I can adjust that later. Okay, well that kind of works.
Yeah. Now the height on these walls won't be exactly where we left it because we do have Snap to Grid on, but we can go back and fill that in later.
Yep. All right,
So there's the basic layout of our bridge.
yeah, it's reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
Put a view
like
screen
it.
up front and going onto maybe a platform for the commander.
You are correct. That thing does not respect Y values, I think.
Yeah, but that's okay. All I got to do now is turn off Snap to Grid and set it back to 501.55.
Absolutely.
Multi-select, what a wonderful thing. I don't know who added it to the Foundry, but they deserve more praise. Okay.
So we can't say that we've never gotten anything in the Foundry. Because we did not used to have that.
So here's a question. What in the world do Romulans have for doors?
4 doors.
Got that one square.
The Republic uses things that have those glowing green triangles in the middle of them. Obviously, we don't have that in the Foundry yet.
Yeah, those are you're talking about the ones. We just have that one Romulan.
Well, we don't have any. I mean, there is a Romulan door. It's not the kind that will open and close.
Yeah, that's true.
So I would suggest just not worrying about doors at the moment.
Fair enough. Though something I might do is kind of a trick. Just kind of add a... And that'll just kind of give the illusion of an archway.
Oh, that's a good idea. And see what he's doing here is he's putting in a few more walls. All you're going to see is just the end of it, which will create a little bit more of a constricted doorway sort of a thing and have like kind of an arch because they'll probably meet in the middle there with their ceiling, their curved ceiling pieces.
All right, so we ready to move on to other sections?
Yes. Let's do the ready room. I think it'll be right close to the bridge.
And it's obviously going to have a narrower entryway since it's a single room.
Sure.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be too big. Most ready rooms are not.
Yeah, I'd say definitely smaller than the bridge itself.
Alright, should be enough. I'm actually going to try something here. I'm going to take that Romulan door, stick it right there.
One thing when you're building ship and space station interiors is to kind of have some closed doors in places.
Yeah.
Which will kind of create the illusion that it's a bigger area, even if you can't get to all of it. Now you'll probably have to do some testing on that door to make sure that there's no gaps at the edges.
Yeah.
why don't you do a test run here, and we'll see how it turned out. So while we're waiting, why don't you guys tell us, Mark and Dragoon, tell us what sort of maps you've built in this manner before.
Well, I have one map in part 2, the one that I spent like 6 months on.
Which is fantastic, I must say.
It will be once it's released.
I can only think of 2 Sky Castle type things I've ever done. One of them was the Beta Rana station interior, which is sadly non-functional at this time due to a glitch. But that one I built an interior with multiple levels and rooms out of the old stone slab floors and various, mostly not quite Federation-themed walls. I think I actually used like the gray stone walls because they look kind of sort of like what you would see on the inside of a ship, even though they're not actually detailed like a ship wall. Why? Because the area I built was large and I needed large props to avoid running over my limit.
Mm.
All right,
so it looks like our door there is a little too high.
Yeah, I'm also really tempted to take these walls and the ceiling down because it just feels really tall right now.
Yeah. I say one piece of advice I would have for everybody is, don't be afraid to hide some of the geometry under the floor. So go for it, Greendragoon.
All right, set this guy to.
Now, this is where multi-select comes in handy.
Oh yeah. Okay, so I want to fix one thing. Just make sure I don't make the mistake. I make those changes before I move everything because everything is about to change. Okay, so I'm actually going to take it down at least 3 meters. Yeah, I'm really hoping that it'll kind of give. I mean, with the archway of those walls, kind of give it a feeling of. Whoa! I think I accidentally selected the spawn point.
Did you spawn under the map?
I spawned under the floor.
Ah.
I've actually noticed on some occasions where if you have the spawn point in just the right spot, it will be erratic as to where it actually puts you.
Spawn point prediction can be a little tricky sometimes. Okay, so if we go back into our hallway section, obviously I need to work on the door again. It's a little shorter.
To say there's always been, a reason why Cryptic has done this. They have very high walls and very, very high ceilings because of the camera movement that needs to happen with third person.
Yeah.
But I'd say that looks pretty decent.
Good enough for this tutorial.
Now here's the question. Oh, you must have gotten the door as well.
Yeah, I probably did.
When you were multi-selecting. Good thing you didn't hit the floor or the ceiling, though.
All right, you said you had a question.
What's that?
You said you had a question.
Did I?
Said here's a question.
I don't remember my question, if I had one.
You sure he wasn't just asking about things that you've done like this in the past? That question?
I couldn't tell you.
Let's see. You answered that one, and Mark answered that one. I've built many of these things before. My very first one was the Romulan Senate building. Just still one of my favorite things I've ever built. Probably one of the most recent ones people will be familiar with is I built one for Purity, for Purity 6, which was a conference room and a brig. Pretty proud of that conference room because it has, I used the glass display things from Utopia Planitia as glass panels in the window. Well, that covers the whole height now. It just is a little off center. Our door there.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'd say it looks pretty good, and it'll look even better when we get it fleshed out with some objects and things like that. So.
Yep.
All right, so why don't you go ahead and build the outline for the mess hall at the end of the corridor there. That closed door we can consider our turbo lift to other decks.
Ooh, this reminds me of something that I thought was kind of entertaining to do in the past, is that when you place doors into places you can't actually go, it's interesting to make it so that the person can examine the door and get a description of where the door goes, and maybe possibly an explanation of why you can't go that way. One of the things that I did in Beta Rana Station is that I set one of the doors so that it leads into the section of the space station that's occupied by the Tholians, and obviously you can't go there without an EV suit.
That's actually a very good idea. Kind of adds to the immersion. Say, a little message, you interact with that door and it says, this door leads to such and such area, which is off limits right now because of such and such. Or in this case, if you were building a mission out of this, you might put an interact on that door, which will lead you to the next map or something like that. And that's how you exit. Pax in the chat room says that he just built a map using this technique for Valley of the Shadow, which is the first time that he's ever done this. There's definitely a first time for everything. I think a lot of people start out mostly using the base maps or altering them to suit their needs. I know it was a long time before I attempted anything like this.
In one of my
Obviously,
first missions,
Dragoon is weird. He doesn't do things like that.
I don't know. I didn't I think the only custom construction I had in part 1 was the Admiral's office, and it wasn't very big.
In one of my first missions, I tinkered with the Vorn Ground base map just because I thought it looked cool, even though I'd never done the mission associated with it, and thus had no idea what some of the stuff on the map actually was.
That's the one where it's like all the plants and everything are assimilated, right?
Well, giant mushrooms. It also has these really cool elevated walkways. That was the thing I liked about the map and why I decided I wanted to use it, because I just love the idea of having your character go up on the elevated walkways. And then I got horribly disappointed when I realized that we can't actually place proper ramps and staircases, and I had to make do with these giant ramp things that look, well, giant. Oh well.
Sorry, I was noting that door needed a... I want to use the door in a couple of places, but I'd rather only build it once. So I'm going to quick try and place this.
Well, one thing that I would like to take a short time to point out is that when you're using dozens of the same prop, it's helpful to come up with some sort of naming convention so that you can find a specific prop in the list. Like in this case, you could like have the ones at the bottom called south wall or something like that.
And so you can rename objects, and it is often quite useful to do so.
And especially if you plan to do any trigger work, it's like downright necessary. Ooh, very close. What do you think, guys? Are my walls turning out pretty well?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah, I'm buffering, so yeah.
So we know sometimes people have a little bit hard time watching the stream. We're not always sure exactly why. So now that you've got your door mostly how you like it, you can kind of copy and paste or duplicate and add it elsewhere.
Exactly. But I do need to adjust the...
And one of the things I would recommend, if you're just starting out doing this type of map, make it easy on yourself and just do like one permission. Don't do like I do sometimes where I decide I'm going to do one of these for every map, because it gets a little excessive.
Yeah, I don't even want to think how long it would have taken me if I had done more than just that one map in part 2.
A really good detailed interior, you're going to have to go through over everything dozens of times to get it to look really, really good.
Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, one of the things that, and we were talking to, I believe who was it on Twitter today that was saying that he was up against the object limit?
Oh, it was Admiral Aaron.
Admiral Aaron, which is something that everybody has done before when you're doing one of these maps. Is the object limit is, was it 475?
475 for detail objects. Buildings,
detail objects.
It's 64.
And that's one place where planning kind of helps you out. I mean, we obviously knew exactly which 3 rooms we were going to need. We knew we were going to need some hallways as well, and so there's only a need to build that. You don't have to worry about anything else.
And you'll also notice that we are building out all of the walls and sections first before we start adding any detail.
Yes. And when you reach the end, quote in air quotes, and you decide, oh wait, I need another room. If you got the budget for it, you can do it. If not, then you might have to figure out if you need to trim. And there's almost always, you can find objects that you can trim.
Yeah, I've had to do that painfully.
If you haven't planned. If you have planned, even sometimes then.
Yeah, I did that in Beta Rana Station. I eventually ran out of objects. So certain rooms got redesigned to have less wall segments by changing the shape of the room.
Oh, yeah. I had a big one when I did it's not finished yet, but when in Starbase 1, where I wanted roads between all of the buildings. And the way I had built the roads initially, where they had a curb as well, used up far more objects than I had budget for. So I had to redesign how to do that and figure out a longer item to use for the curb.
Look at my awesome Romulan wall doors.
Well, I will as soon as the stream catches up. Yeah,
That
excellent.
one's still offset. No, I really want to break up this floor or something, but that would be a detail, and a detail I
Yeah.
wouldn't want to add until...
Well, that'll be pretty much what's next. And I like how you kind of continued the motif of having that horizontal wall above where the doors are, so you can kind of tell where's an open door and where's a closed doors.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good, because one of the things that, well, from a real world point of view, it kind of makes sense, but from an in-game perspective, it's annoying, is when you literally have to wander around and look at all of the walls to figure out where the door is.
Well, I mean, it kind of just helps sell things.
Mm-hmm. Looks like you do need one over the mess hall door.
Yep. Can't see it, but I'm adding that right now. Okay.
You're ahead of me, literally.
The time-space paradox.
So we essentially have our outline here. We have
Yeah.
the basic the floor map, you might say. So the next thing is fleshing out each room and figuring out what objects that we're going to need. So which
Well-
do you want to start with?
Well, we're not in danger of going over the object limit, so I'd like to start with details
Actually,
for the floors.
why don't you show people how to check the object limit?
Okay, well, easiest way I do is select everything, unselect anything that isn't a detail object like the spawn point, or in case it would be things like NPC groups and whatnot. And you'll see right now it says 60 components selected. So we're currently at 60 out of 475.
Oh, we're good.
I think we got a little bit of leeway here.
We got some leeway. Okay, so I think I would probably start with the quickest one first, which would be the ready room.
Okay.
Get that taken care of. So what would be in a ready room?
Well, consoles, chairs. We actually have several different Romulan versions of consoles and chairs.
Yeah, quite a number
And
of
tables.
Yeah.
So I'm going to lay down some floors. Although, on second thought, I'm going to switch that to... I'm going to go dark green. Dark green will match a little better. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and put 2 of these guys in. That's going to be my... something to kind of break up the floor here. Now the key is I just want to offset it slightly. So I'm going to put it like 500.01. And then the other one at like 500.011. And this will be near indistinguishable as far as which one is on top, but it'll prevent flickering. Let's go ahead and preview that.
That's one thing we haven't talked about. When objects overlap, and they overlap exactly, you're going to get some texture flickering. And the way to do that is to just offset it by 0.001. And I think actually the carpets, you don't have to worry about that on.
Really? They don't flicker?
I don't think they do. I think some of the other floors do, but the carpets should be fine.
Huh, that's strange. But anyway, I mean, this kind of just gives a nice separation kind of breaks up the room, because I mean that's a big.
It really ties the room together.
Yeah. I wish there was something I could do in the corridor, but I don't know if I've got anything narrow enough.
No, I don't think we do.
I could do
I-
tiny little 10 or blocks of 10.
Yeah,
I guess it could
I've
be a
actually
way.
done that as well.
Well,
in
You,
one of
you-
my missions.
you could put in one of the really small consoles. Yeah, well, one thing I've come to the conclusion about when doing ship and space station interiors is that you can never have too many consoles unless they get in the way. Well, once you have to
Yes, you
walk
wanna make
around
sure that
to
you-
go down
yeah.
the hallway are bad, but throwing them in random corners makes the place look used.
One nice thing is because these carpet blocks are still in feet instead of meters, they fit perfectly with Snap-to-Grid. Oh, that's why I can't. It's like, why can't I? Spawn points right there. Now, obviously,
The
if you're
spawn point is sort of annoying because you can't make it view above everything else. Maybe that's a suggestion for the cryptic devs if they're listening and want to know about features or something that we would like to see. How about a spawn point that's always on top of whatever you're building?
Well, Neverwinter has this really cool feature where you can set the priority of objects, and basically, if any object has there's like a middle like default, but then if anything you set as a higher priority will always appear on top. Get out of the way, spawn point.
Yeah, I would like to have that.
There's a lot of things I'd love from that. And keep dreaming.
Well, one thing that's annoyed me in many occasions with mapping is that if you do something like placing one of the giant mushrooms on a map, you will always see the top of the giant mushroom whenever you're walking on the ground beneath it.
Primer has a good suggestion. He says, add a second spawn point and then remove the first. To
That's
put that
really
back
good.
on top. Which I was just testing, and that absolutely works.
Aside, I've been working on 3D Studio Max too much lately. Keep wanting to hold down Control and when I build a mouse to move.
That's the really sophisticated stuff that you're doing there.
Okay.
Compared to what we do in Foundry.
I don't know. I mean, at its core, it's kind of the same concepts. I think the fact that I am kind of used to thinking in three-dimensional space kind of helps deal with the Foundry.
But believe it or not, the image editing thing I use most often is Paint.
Well, it's cheap, that's for sure.
Yeah, freeware is good, right? And there's a lot of things you can do with it once you learn all of the little tricks and whatnot in the software.
Say, I do a lot of Photoshop at work.
I'm doing a lot of work in Illustrator lately. Okay, so my carpet's a tad high, but it's definitely making the hallways look better.
Sometimes it's good because when you got those flat surfaces, it's great to break it up a little.
Exactly. That said, if we were building a massive
I would say
section,
I would say move it a little bit down
yeah.
in y value, just a little bit.
One thing I will say is if you're dealing with like a very large map, I would not do things like this because you will.
It will eat up your budget.
Yeah. I originally had like this grading that ran throughout my map in part 2, and had to rip it all out when I hit the object limit.
Yeah, those little 3-foot metal grates look cool, but they're 3 feet, and it takes
need
an
a lot of
insane
them.
number of them.
Yeah. All right. That should do it. I'm going to go ahead and, before I jump back in, add in a, add in the carpets for the other rooms. Got quiet. Did I lose you guys?
Nope, we're still here.
Oh, okay. So
We're with you to the end of the line, buddy.
just making sure the internet agrees.
Bonus points for anyone who knows that reference.
That's a reference?
Yeah. One of my favorite movies out of recent films.
All right, I'm going to test your theory that carpets don't clip.
I'm fairly certain they don't.
That looks like a very Romulan pattern.
Since Romulans are all about the bird motif, I could almost pass for a bird. I like it.
A pattern for...
We may have to build a mission out of this map. Might be too good not to use.
Said the same thing about that new Romulus map I built. All right. Can't wait to see this. I think this might look cool.
Spoiler, Shirihan only had avian wildlife.
We only had
and-
birds, huh? Oops, you moved your spawn point outside the walls there.
Yep.
That can be a danger. Here's you should use Primar's trick. Put a new spawn point on there and delete the old one. As soon as you're done previewing here.
Oh, I'm really liking this. Though I should probably... Well, you were totally right about the carpets not clipping.
Yeah.
That is totally wild. I wonder if that's like a
I think it's a
material
I think it's a
trick.
function of the texture that they have.
Maybe it's just such a busy texture you can't even tell.
Well, with some things, you can stick multiple objects together, and the texture on them will always look smooth and fluid, like the tops of the Grethel walls. That stone surface that they have on the top, it doesn't matter how you mix and match the Grethel walls, it will always look perfectly tiled.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I am loving this. I mean, this is
Okay.
really starting to look nice.
It's good stuff. Let's start laying down some consoles and stuff.
Okay.
Let's start
Yeah,
with
this room almost begs for a conference table.
Which one?
The big one that was
Oh,
on
the mess hall?
screen. Oh, is that what that's supposed to be?
Yep. That was one of our...
Well, in that case, several smaller tables.
Don't mess up your point there. I liked having the point on the carpet.
Well, I thought it looked a little strange just having it stop in the middle of the hallway there. I think it'll look nice. All right, let's throw down some consoles. Which is going to be a new thing that we need to figure out the Y value of.
There's always something like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because as mentioned before, some consoles just don't match up with the floor neatly.
Okay, well, let's start with one of these guys. It have some like something akin to ops stations and like that con and ops console you see like on the Enterprise.
Velocitor says 2 carpets are missing. And he says check the Y values, which is always something that you got to look out for.
Oh, that would be those guys. That's all right.
That's why it helps you to playtest a lot, to hit play map quite often.
These guys are going to be missing. Okay. Something else I'm going to throw in there is view screen.
Mm-hmm. We are unfortunately very limited as to what we can do for view screens.
And by limited, I think I only know of one.
Yeah.
Actually,
My problem is I always forget which one.
Well, one thing that just occurred to me about Romulan consoles is that unlike certain other factions, the Romulan consoles don't have view screens attached to them. Just rows of buttons and blinky things.
Yep.
Well, before New Romulans, I don't remember them. Can't remember them ever building a Romulan bridge.
I'm pretty sure they didn't. We had a lot of space stations. I think we might have had a couple of ship interiors, some of which are in the Foundry, but I don't think we had any bridges. Primar says it's console civilian L05 is the view screen.
Civilian.
Thank you very much, Primar. I always forget which one that is.
Well, one interesting thing with some of the Romulan consoles is that they have these big pieces of machinery attached to them.
Yeah, like generators. I was actually going to suggest using some of
Big
those
one.
for your alcoves.
There it is. It's under consoles instead of console. Alright, trying to remember how this... Okay. And one of the keys is going to be, because we... are sticking this on a Romulan bridge. We're going to sync this. There we go, 498. Alright, let's fire this up, see how it looks. Now we can...
Primer saying minus 2.5 on the Y value for that one.
Now he tells me.
That's why it's helpful to, talk to lots of Foundry authors, because lots of people have used these things before and they might know what you need.
Okay, I got it in place. Needs to sync a little bit. I don't know if it's a 0.5, but on the plus side, the Romulan consoles look about right. Alright, kick off.
Yeah, that's looking pretty good. I might actually leave that view screen right where it is.
Yeah, I'm going to take it down just a little bit. See if I can get rid of those, the tops of those grills or whatever. But in the meantime...
I'll tell you one thing that you can put on either side of the view screen and make it feel a little bit more Romulan.
Okay.
Is there's two of them, or actually just one. Pillar Romulan 01. Put two of them, one on either side of the view screen.
Oh, that'll work nicely.
Pax says that we've given him some ideas for enhancing his own custom interior, and maybe his mission won't actually be out this weekend after all. Sorry about that, Pax.
We have done our job well, then.
Mm-hmm.
All right, since the consoles are about in the right position, do we want to kick around more of those?
Sure.
I assume most of the consoles should still have or keep similar Y values.
It's always good to double check afterwards, though, because strange things
don't
sometimes
always
happen.
Yeah, strange things happen.
I always loved this part about building custom interiors. It's just the adding on the layer and layers and layers of detail.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of makes it fun is that you've got such a solid base to build on. You don't have to worry. You got all your walls in place. You got all your floors in place, ceilings in place. Don't have to worry about any of that. All you just got to do is keep fleshing it out.
Exactly.
And a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more. Now, one thing I noticed that Dragoon is doing here, which is okay, but I would say, don't be afraid to make your maps asymmetrical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, when I did Beta Rana Station, I actually had a purposeful reason for making it so that certain parts of the map looks drastically different from others because, well, as I mentioned earlier, certain parts of the station interior were intentionally Tholian themed, whereas the other parts were meant for the habitation of the Bosliks, so they had a more traditional mercenary sort of theme to them.
So here's a question for you, Mark. What did you do for this Tholian theme? Like, how did you make that look?
I used a bunch of crystal things, not necessarily as, there's this pretty thing sitting in the corner, but like for wall corners where you would have a pillar or something, I would take these tall, thin crystal props and use them in place of the standard columns that you will sometimes see on the Fed or Romulan maps. Also, I would use them to hide the joints between wall segments and things like that.
Sounds good.
And then there was that thing I did with the Tholian computer where I kind of sort of borrowed inspiration from Superman's Fortress of Solitude. As one of the objectives, you take these crystalline shards off of this thing over to the side, and you insert them into these consoles. And as part of one of the objectives, to make the computer do something, lots of people told me they thought that was really cool. I didn't tell the people that told me they thought it was cool just how annoying it was to build the computer, because the props you see are actually the tips of giant boulder objects that are hidden under the floor. Yeah, because there aren't small, neat, tiny crystals that look like you could pick them up and carry them actually available as individual props. There are some that are attached to gigantic boulders, though. So you hide the boulder under the floor, and then you have the person interact with the tiny piece that they see sticking up through the floor. Also, this was the part of the map that I mentioned earlier where I used those giant crystal mushroom things to make small rooms.
Yep.
Because, the crystal mushrooms, when you go inside them, they make this really cool twinkling sound. And also, they have all those little, crystals sticking out everywhere. It just looked to me like something that a Tholian might find to be comfortable and homely. Or homey or something. So I used that for what were supposed to be Tholian living quarters.
It's definitely a great skill to have as a Foundry author, is to be able to sort of figure out those weird and unconventional uses for assets.
Wonder if this will work. Try to look to
And
Federation.
you'll spend a lot of time wondering if this will work. I'm actually, as we speak, taking some of the things that you've been doing here, Dragoon, and adding them to a map that I've been building for one of my missions. Especially with that sort of, the middle floor carpet kind of a thing.
Just need to do more episodes of Help Dragoon flesh out a map.
Yes. Yes, we should. Primar says he's using the top/banner section of the booths from old ESD as walls on his bridge.
I've used found like a ton of ways to use those old props, like showing the edge of them.
Yeah, those props always look weird to me.
I think that platform needs to come down a bit, but otherwise it's starting to look quite good. I would say, the color may not quite match, but, we're always sort of limited with what we can do.
I don't know, color's
to
not
pieces
bothering
available.
me.
Well, where you're really going to see the limits is in a second when we try and find a captain's chair. Of course, you can always get around that by saying something like, oh, the captain doesn't believe in having a chair. If this is not supposed to be the player's ship.
or you could do something kind of like with the manual steering column in Insurrection and have it so that the captain's chair retracts into the deck when he's not using it.
The funny thing is that the Romulans actually had those really iconic chairs. They were like semicircles with the spheres mounted in them. Yeah, my options are not great.
There's a Romulan chair, but it's more of a stool than an actual chair.
Yeah. So I'm thinking, short of some elaborate construction I'm not prepared to do at this time, our choices are either one of the ESD chairs, like Admiral Quinn's, or Edison, or the Klingon one.
I'd say go with Admiral Quinn's, because it's... Or, use one of those that's sittable.
Well,
One
there's
thing
only
to
one that's
consider
sittable.
is making a composite object that is pieces of things that aren't actually chairs.
I always used to use the Klingon chair. Because it's the only one we had.
Well, what I mean is like to take that and like dress it up a little bit by adding some small objects to it. In one of my missions, I made this composite chair out of a Rycian beach chair and some small object that was like supposed to be like the end of a bench or something like that. So that I made something that looked like a pilot's chair that you might lie down in or something.
I might go for a more complex custom-built chair out of various assets, but I'd be here all night.
Yeah.
Good point. That particular construction did take me a while to come up with the idea for.
And of course I have it facing the wrong way. But otherwise, this thing is really starting to come together.
Absolutely.
can almost believe this thing.
Obviously, if we had more time, we'd go for even more stuff. But, like for instance, ceiling lights. I mean, we got those nice ones from ESD now. I'd use some of those. But for the moment, I'd say let's move on to the ready room.
Okay.
That one should be fairly simple. I'd say, we need like a desk and a chair and some more consoles. Maybe a lamp, fish tank. What would a captain's ready room be without a fish tank, right?
Not Picard's ready room.
Let me take inventory here of Romulan banner. I'll try and work that in later.
Those are good stuff. I like those.
Ooh,
Those banners are
after
great.
him had a question about chairs that you can sit in.
Just the one from ESD, and then I think one of the TOS tables has sittable chairs around it.
Yeah. And so let's see what.
Wait, what about
find
the
out what
TOS
those chairs
captain's
actually are.
chair? What about the TOS captain's chair?
I've never tried it.
I will do some investigating and I will find out.
It's a little large, but we've got a table, Romulan table to work with. No, it's not all that ornate, but I'm going to go ahead and use the Romulan chair we have.
Yeah, for a mess hall, those stool-like chairs would be a pretty good option, really, because it's not something people are going to expect to sit in for long periods of time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, the TOS captain's chair is not sittable.
I'm not too worried about sittable chairs at this point.
Sure. Okay, I just posted the name in our chat room of the sittable chair from ESD that was just added. It's called, very simply, ESD Task Chair 01-Sittable.
Yeah, and then there's also a TOS table that has sittable chairs around it.
Yeah, let me find the name of that.
So I remember we were testing that one map of yours when we figured it out.
Yep.
Another one of those.
Okay,
Whatever happened.
that one is Table-TOS Lounge.
I just thought of an interesting question. What happens if you overlay a slightly larger chair onto a sittable chair? Can you still double-click on it to use the sit action?
I don't know. I think things would get
as
very
long
weird.
as, yeah, I think the other chair would block it.
Yeah, it's just something I suddenly realized that I've never tinkered with the sittable chairs.
And one thing I think I've heard some people were tinkering with was adding a very tiny reach marker right on the chair. So essentially, you make the objective is to sit in, is to sit in the chair and it triggers the reach marker.
I was actually testing that,
Mm-hmm.
and it does work, except that as long as you're sitting, it blocks all pop-up dialogues.
Oh, that sucks.
That kind of kills any use for it.
Right. It does, yeah.
I've seen people kind of sort of attempt to do that though in some missions, and every time that I saw it happen, I realized that you could trigger the reach marker simply by standing on the chair.
Yeah, well, in the case of the little chairs, you have to put the reach markers like slightly in front of the chair, and that's where your character actually resides when he or she's sitting. But yeah, unfortunately, it'll set off the objective, but it will suppress all pop-up dialogues until you get out of the chair.
Yeah, Primar hit on one of the reasons that I use the rapier interior is because it actually does have a fixed star field on one side of the map, which you can use if you need as background.
It's blue, but it is useful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of those baked-in features that gets talked about a lot.
Which actually, it's not entirely a star field. It is because of what that mission was. It's actually the inside of the wormhole.
Huh.
But it does have stars on it.
As Sir Boulevard reminds me. Which I had forgotten about.
Alright, I think I've got the... Unless you can think of something else that might be in a Romulan ready room.
Oh, I'm sure that will do it. Why don't you move on to the mess hall?
There's actually a Romulan table with chairs around it, which is going to be incredibly nice and useful.
Perfect. Now, if only we had some kind of Romulan replicator.
Ooh, not that. Although...
I like that. Kind of nifty offset.
Well, it's one of those things that the doorway doesn't lead directly into the center of the room, so that kind of helps. Okay, so what other things can we use to kind of break up this room?
So the question came up, why do pop-ups not activate when you're sitting in a chair? And I think it's just something that's kind of hard-coded into the game where that animation just blocks other things from happening.
Yeah. You know, so the one time that Cryptic did it, they cut to a cutscene.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. PAX is recommending Console-Romulan 02 as a Romulan replicator.
Just the freestanding one?
Certainly could work.
Actually, I was thinking there's this Romulan ship column, but it's got a couple of tiny consoles next to it, and I think those
It
might
does
do.
kind of look like a replicator, yeah. But my biggest piece of advice for a new author trying to do interiors is to sit down and flip through all of the assets and look at everything, both in the menu list and in the actual map, because, well, I mean, that's just something that I've done several times, is I look at things like, okay, that looks like something I might possibly want to use, so I stick it on the map to see what it actually looks like.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Just build.
And I do it all the time, and I find like new things every time, or things I had forgotten were there.
Like, there's one of those ancient ruins buildings that has giant tree roots sticking out of it instead of crystal spires like every other one of the giant ruins buildings.
All right, I think we're ready for another preview. I'm building a lot of this map just off of the top of my head. We'll see if I was even remotely close to right.
Hello, Baz. Yes, you are late. Bazag has just joined us in the chat room.
Yes, Baz, we're docking you 50 points.
You lose 50 DKP.
Alright, so might move those columns, like merge them into the side walls. I think it just makes things feel way too cramped to have them in the center of the room. Gotta move out that statue too.
Yep.
Let's go check the...
See, this is what we mean about trial and error. You know, you just got to play with it and see what works and what doesn't. Move things if you need.
Our Romulan ready room is not looking too bad. Though my console's not there, which means I probably forgot to set the Y value.
Yep. No, that looks quite good.
Need to move that one column over the bridge. But otherwise...
One trick I've learned about doing Y values like that is that you can clone an object, and then when you select the object, you can actually change the type of object that the object is after you place it on the map.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Alright, so I'm going to move you guys. It's going to be right there. And that just makes things feel a little better. So you make it feel like the replicators are just off to the side there.
And what you kind of done there is sink it into the wall a little bit so that only one side is showing.
Exactly. The table's a little bit, so we're going to bring back the angled look since I don't have the consoles in the way there anymore.
Yeah. I liked that angle look.
But it also kind of facilitates flow through the dining area, as it gives easy access to both the replicators. Let's see, this Romulan
So we're also
statue had to come
thinking
up.
in a sort of a feng shui feeling as we go here. We're room designers.
Let's see, this guy was missing because I forgot to set the Y value. That's all the things I can remember. So we got about 15 minutes left.
That's right. I say, the next few steps in creating your map would be to, if we were doing this for real, would be then to place your NPCs. You'd want to have, this being a Romulan ship, you'd want to have Romulan crew members stationed around at different areas, maybe lots in the mess hall eating. You would want lots on your bridge, the captain in his ready room. Yeah, that looks really good. Well, you maybe want to move those out a bit more from the walls. The replicators?
Yeah.
Or our AirSats replicators?
All right, just taking mental note of all the things I need to tweak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the mess hall's looking pretty good now.
So Baz says,
kind of
how would you... Oh, go ahead.
It is kind of interesting how that little console that's attached to your Earthsat's replicator looks like it's two consoles that are facing each other.
It does a little bit. So Baz says, how would you place lots of NPCs quickly? Well, Baz, if it's a map that you're not going to have combat on, you use friendly mobs from the NPC groups tab. And for this one, obviously, we got already Romulan Republic mobs, so we have that taken care of, and then you just move them around. And that gives you, 5, 6, 7 mobs in one guy, essentially.
Yep.
And after you get all your
Also,
NPCs in place, go ahead.
It's good to remember that there are certain aspects of an NPC mob that don't translate over to a contact, because NPC mobs, when you click on them, you will see a rank insignia and all that fun stuff. Whereas with contacts, you just see this blank line where the rank would be. And some of the default costume options are either extremely difficult to recreate or stuff you can't do, because a lot of the NPCs have interesting costumes and not just the standard boring Starfleet uniform.
Yeah, I say the especially the Romulans that spawn in the friendly Romulan mobs, they're pretty generic. So you may want to, and especially because we have lots of uniform options now, so you may want to add your own. You can reskin those guys, obviously. So Dragoon, tell us how many objects do we have in our map so far?
Well, select it, subtract spawn point. We're up to 162.
162, that's pretty decent.
Yeah, I mean, it's not obviously not a large map, but it's a decent, it's a good size.
It's a decent size build, yeah.
I don't care what Durkin says, I'm going to have a few lights. Break up those ceilings.
Mm-hmm. So, back to if we were building this for real, once you're done placing your NPCs, then you lay down your objectives, and then you play test and make sure it all works like it should. And one of the things you definitely want to do, especially with these maps, is do a published playtest where you actually publish the mission and play through it. Because often enough, there could be issues with like BOF pathing. Your bridge officers might have trouble getting through tight spaces or things like that, and you want to be sensitive to that and try and fix it if you can.
In this case, this map shouldn't have too many problems.
No, I wouldn't think it would.
Well, also there are some situations where bridge officers just seem to go nuts. Like I remember this one guy who, his stated reason for doing this was he was wanting to make bridge officer pathing smoother and keep them from getting hung up on the little fin things on the walls, which this wall style you're using has those little fins sticking out too. Mm-hmm. So he stuck invisible walls so that your bridge officers couldn't bump into the fins. And for some reason, whenever I played the mission, my bridge officers would jump through the invisible wall so that they could stand on the fin.
Yeah, well, there's a bit of code that got introduced at some point that basically gives BOFs the right to hop through solid objects if they think they ought to be able to go through. This is what's kind of given so much havoc to like sets that do lots of trigger work, because pathing doesn't realize that anything with triggers exists, and so if your entire map happens to be triggered, then it assumes nothing's there, and then the BOFs end up popping through the floor or something like that.
Mark managed to do one where the bridge officers would simply hide in a corner and you would never see them on the entire map.
Which was by accident, actually, that happened. So a couple more things on NPCs. Baz reminds me that NPC mobs are great for having lots of background characters, but they kind of have to be background characters because you can't apply any dialogue to them. Like you can't make it so you can go up and interact with them. You also can't. You have to have them all doing the same animation if you have them doing an animation. Makes them kind of good for bridge officers because bridge officers are generally going to be, standing at a console or sitting at a console. So you can have one combat mob for all of the bridge officers. Have them all doing the same animation of typing.
Well, let's see. How much time do we have left? About 10 minutes?
We have about 10 minutes.
Do I want to try and quick see if I can throw down a couple of NPC groups?
Mm-hmm. Lincoln in Space also reminds us that, PAX reminds us that Wander does not work in preview. Same thing with patrols. Patrols will sort of work, but they're not necessarily really calculated until publish is when those things are calculated.
Another thing that I would like to mention is that it's good to set your NPC spawns to be slightly above the floor.
Yes.
Because I have on a few rare occasions seen bizarre situations where a spawn point that appeared to be above the floor actually would somehow spawn you inside the floor.
Do a little eyeballing on the...
Half a meter, I think, works best, or maybe a quarter of a meter, because you don't actually fall far enough with that for it to really be noticeable, unless you actually see them spawn, because when you do a regular map load, everything spawns before you see the map.
Yeah. Most cases, you'll just kind of spawn on the ground and they won't notice that you fell.
Now, one thing that Dragoon is doing here is that he's going to try and make all these guys sitting at their tables in the mess hall, which can be a little tricky. You generally have to position them kind of on the leading edge of the chair.
Yeah, I tend to
And
follow
this takes some trial and error. Yes, Mr. Watkins. Yeah, wander paths are not calculated until it gets published. So you kind of have to take a guess as to the settings and then do some published play tests and see if it worked. As far as walking speed and duration, distance, all that kind of stuff. I find that, like somewhere between 8 and 12 is pretty good for walking speed. Dragoon is setting his animation. And then we'll do a preview and see if it worked.
I guess it really doesn't work anymore. All right. Never mind. It's not that important.
I'd say one last thing on custom maps is to, kind of play with the backdrops as well, because that can create some interesting lighting even if you don't have any windows.
Romulan Republic are friendly, right?
Yes.
Okay, they're not actually listed as friendly.
Yeah, I know. That was something I
Well,
reported way back when it was on Tribble, right after Legacy, or for Legacy Romulus, and it never got fixed.
Are the Fed or Klingon mobs tagged as friendly either?
Fed mobs are tagged as friendly.
If you're on Fed. If you're on a Fed character, yeah. If you're on a Klingon character, the Klingons are tagged as friendlies. By that I mean they'll show up when you, in the NPC groups thing, when you say allegiance friendly, it will show you the ones that should be friendly, except for Romulan and Reman Rebellion mobs.
I never actually tinkered with that function.
Yeah.
I just kind of memorized which ones were which, and
Yeah, they are actually friendly. They're just not necessarily listed as such in the menu.
All right, so it's unlikely that I'll get these guys perfect on the first try, but
Of course.
they'll probably be close.
It's unlikely that you'll get them perfect at all. Knowing
Especially
these
when
sitting
you're using
animations
it
as we
sitting.
do. Yeah.
I don't know. I did this with the mess hall on the Fed side. Didn't do too bad my first time around. I would just go through and tweak some. Let's throw some.
One fun thing about using friendly mobs like that is that you could have a situation where, say, we have an enemy board the ship, and those guys will rush in to help you.
Funny enough, in unexpected situations on cryptic social maps, they'll often rush in and try to help you.
or kill you.
Now, a couple of times when Klingons have gotten onto Earth space dock.
Yeah.
Gotten some compliments on our map building here from the chat room. Hippie John says it's a really nice map, and Lincoln in
thank
Space
you.
called it swanky. I'm sure you're supposed to take that as a compliment.
I think swanky is a compliment.
I say there is a small danger here of, you see, Dragoon has put some lights up on the ceiling, which on the map here I've actually covered up his consoles that he's trying to put an NPC at now. So you can kind of, as he's doing, move him out of the way and move him back.
Yeah. It's annoying how placing objects will hide the stuff that's there. Nothing we can do about that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm actually going to steal a couple of my
Guys from the mess hall.
since they're sitting so nicely.
Watkins says that swanky is better than swaggy.
And definitely don't be afraid to just throw things down, see what sticks.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of foundries trying new things.
And don't be afraid to use the backs of objects or the top of objects.
Yeah. I mean, we're frequently using things for uses other than their original intent.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, when I did the Ruined City in Diplomacy in the Gamma Quadrant, I started the map out by literally taking every one of the ruins buildings and just throwing them onto the map in random locations and then moving them around until I had something that I thought looked cool.
So let's do a preview here. We are just about out of time.
All right, let's go to our mess hall. I did pretty well. Just want to put a couple guys over here. Not sure where they got off to. But yeah, these guys, look at them. All sitting in their chairs,
Yes,
enjoying the food they're not eating.
I think maybe on your other mob you didn't set the Y value. Perhaps.
Maybe.
I'm trying to remember what exactly the best object for making an imitation plate is.
Okay, so these guys.
I think there's some actual plates and cups.
I know there's.
I think there is actually now.
I'm not sure about plates.
Mm-hmm.
The added plate?
There's a bowl. I know there's a bowl.
Yep. You see those guys there need to be moved a little bit closer to their consoles.
Yep.
But that's all right.
I think we've illustrated
pretty good
the
for a
point.
first attempt. Yeah.
So what do you think, guys? Would you
I think that's
rate a
successful
mission that
map
had
there.
this map in it well?
Well, Watkins
I
says
would,
it was
yeah.
impressive.
He says impressive putting it together in 2 hours.
Especially since it was designed by committee.
Yeah, exactly.
So is a believable Romulan map is a good question.
I would say so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. It certainly
throw a few of
reminds
those
me
Romulan civilian banners around. Would certainly
Yeah.
help.
yeah.
Puts the logo.
Yeah, I mean that would definitely kind of sell it.
It definitely reminds me of the Starbase interior for Divided Impera.
Yeah, because
Obviously-
the Romulan assets that we have are actually from that era of cryptic building. From the launch, the stuff that was in at launch. That's the Romulan assets that we have. Obviously, we'd love to have more, and we hear that Tumor Boy's next round of Foundry objects is new Romulus stuff. So maybe we'll have some more things that you could put in ships interiors like this as well.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe some of the assets from the new Romulan ship interiors.
That'd be nice.
All right.
All right. Well, guys, we are going to do more of this sort of thing in the future for future episodes. So if you have any mission building topics that you'd like us to cover with things like this, so let us know. But for now, Dragoon, if you are ready, you can throw up our contact info.
All right. We can be reached at email. at Foundry Roundtable at live.com. We can also be found on Twitter at Foundry Roundtab. Drogan can be reached at Drogan1701. Markhawkman can be reached at MAR Hawkman. And I can be reached at Greendragoon.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. I think this was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We definitely are going to do more.
And hopefully
So-
it filled you all with lots and lots of ideas.
Yes. And join us next time. But for now, we will say good night.
Good night.
Good night.